Can you imagine getting this idea to the censorship board? It will be absolutely impossible. You take this idea to the censorship board, they're like, Tuan censorship. And it's like, I have that new idea. This is a Malaysian idea, or Malaysian original idea. So here is a script one, here is a script one. This is going to be worldwide. This is going to go on Netflix, world Netflix, and censorship board. Malaysia, kita nak world. Apa cerita? What is the story? Tuan, let me start with the title, Tuan. Let me start with the title, Tuan. The title, Tuan. Tuan. Permainan sotong. Permainan sotong, Tuan. What do you think, Tuan? Cannot. Sotong cannot. This is against Malaysian culture. Ini bukan budaya kita. Sotong is sotong. tak boleh kita sotong, kita tak boleh. Sotong. Because Malaysia we don't have sotong. We don't have sotong. Or the sotong went to Australia already. We don't have sotong. Sotong is not Malaysian culture. Ini bukan budaya kita. This is not our budaya. We cannot have sotong. But no, Tuan, I'm not talking about sotong like that, Tuan. I'm talking about the animal. Choose a different animal lah. Choose ikan ke, permainan ikan ke, permainan gajah ke, permainan kucing ke. Permainan kucing, Tuan. Permainan kucing, international. In English, when they translate, it's pussy games. It's not a problem. Okay, so first hurdle, change the title. Anyway, you ceritakan. So what else is story? So story one is we gathered, or the instigator gather a bunch of people, Tuan. Gather a bunch of people. What type of people? These are the homeless people, Tuan. The kelendangan. Cannot. But we cannot. Malaysia, we don't have homeless. Ini bukan budaya kita. Malaysia, we got no homeless. We are no homeless. We are the progressive nation. Malaysia, we cannot show on Netflix international world that Malaysia got homeless. We don't have homeless. No, kita tak ada. This is not our budaya. We are not our budaya. Yang paling kurang, the lowest standard, the B40. B40 boleh, but not homeless. B40 still got household income, but not homeless. Okay. So Tuan, so if I put the B40, okay, now B40 boleh. Okay, so now we got past that hurdle. We're going to put a bunch of B40s, and we gather them together, and they enter a competition. Competition bagus. This is Malaysian culture. Competition bagus. But you just make sure that one race more in the competition, the other race make difficult for them. You faham. Don't worry, Tuan. B40 all Melayu, Tuan. Oh, boleh. Bagus. Boleh. This B40 all Melayu competition, baik. Okay, Tuan. So the B40, they masuk the competition, and they have to play children game, Tuan. Children game. What type of children game? Guli, batu seremban, panikala, and then they play the Malaysian game. Bagus, budaya kita kan. Then when they play the game, but when they don't play the game, Tuan, they get killed. Tak boleh. Cannot. Killing is not in Malaysia. Our culture, ini bukan budaya kita. In Malaysia, nobody is killing. Tak ada killing in Malaysia. People die, but no killing. Tak boleh, they cannot kill. But Tuan, they need to be killed. They have to have the drama, Tuan. Something has to happen. You choose something else. How about the people who don't play the game well? They get raped. Rogol boleh. Rogol is Malaysian culture. Boleh. Rogol. Semua drama Melayu ada rogol. Tak baik. Kalau they lose the game, they kena rogol.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Harith Iskandar, and welcome once again to another episode of What's Going On Malaysia. I hope everybody is well and safe at home. It is a Sunday evening, the 31st of October, 30th, 31st of October. I've lost track of time. The year has just shot by, has it not? It's just absolutely flown by. I hardly even know what week are in. But what I do know is that last week I had an amazing show, and this week it's probably going to be equally as amazing. First of all, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for checking in with us. I hope you can hear me. I hope you can see me. Please let me know in the comment section that is all good. Mimi Lee says, hello, people. I know we have a lot of people watching from all over Malaysia and all over the world. Uh, and I acknowledge you and I thank you for watching. And if you are watching this either on YouTube or on Facebook, please take the time right now before we begin the show to share this streaming, i.e., even if you're watching this live tonight on a Sunday night, or if you're watching this later on, or if you're even listening to this on Spotify. Yes, we are on Spotify right now, the audio podcast. Please take the time to share this episode of What's Going On Malaysia right now, where we are going to take a look at the Malaysian budget 2022. And well, first of all, I'm not going to make any comments on the budget personally. I have my own opinions of it, but I do have a guest who is not only knowledgeable, not only experienced, but has himself been involved in many of the previous budgets put together by the government, which of course then makes him a respected individual to talk about the budget. Because I did see some comments coming in earlier on my social media saying, oh, Harith, you're a comedian. What do you know about the budget? Well, I'm going to say yes. I am not an expert on the budget. By the way, I realize now, is my screen frozen? Can anybody tell me if my screen is frozen? Please let me know in the comment section. You know what? My kids are probably playing Roblox downstairs. They're not playing Roblox. Okay. Is my screen frozen? Please let me know if my screen is frozen, because I can see that I'm frozen on screen right now. But we're going to continue that straight through to the show. Yes, it's frozen. Minnie's Bridal has, Jim Johnny has also, well, everyone's just letting me know that my screen is frozen. You know what? What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to get off this screen. I'm going to change my camera. Guys, this is all technical right now. This is all absolutely technical. And yes, we are back. There we go. Much better. There you go. Isn't this technology amazing, where we can begin on one technology and move straight across to the other? If you're listening to this on Spotify, I just wanted to let you know that what happened was the screen I was using just now was frozen, and I have now maneuvered onto a different camera to let you know that it's all good. So tonight, we are going to be talking about the budget 2022 and what it holds in store for us. But of course, I've acknowledged I am not the expert. I am by far an expert on economics. I was in art stream, which I did study the subject economics in school. It was called economy. And I have to admit, I didn't do very well. Yes, I'm not shy to admit that. I was far from an economist or far from knowledgeable about even the balance sheets, debit, credit. In school, I was terrible. I had no idea. I was clueless, which is why tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I have invited a very special guest, someone who is, like I said earlier, not only knowledgeable, but let me give you his background. He was the Malaysian minister in the Prime Minister's Department in charge of economic planning unit back in the early 2000s, and he was also a prior Minister of Finance too, which means this gentleman knows what he's talking about. Without much further ado, please welcome into the studio Tan Sri Anor Muhammad Yackop. Apa khabar Tuan? How are you, sir?
Thank you very much, Adi. Thank you for having me in your show tonight.
My
Appreciate.
absolute pleasure. My absolute pleasure. Because I have to admit, when it comes to matters of the economy, I read the articles, I try and understand as best I can the terminology used, the numbers thrown about, and very often, more often than not, it is a bunch of economic jargon to me, and I have to admit I struggle with it, which is why I thank you for being here on the show. Let us jump straight into this, Tansri. Could you take 1 minute to explain to the audience who are watching and listening why they should listen to you, or why you know what you're talking about? A little bit of your brief history, please, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Maybe I'll start with with the anecdote. I was there
Okay.
from 2004 to 2009 as Minister of Finance, too, as you said, preparing the budget. And so I can imagine now how the boys of today go through that process, the long nights, burning the midnight candle. In fact, there were a few guys during my time who did not go home to sleep. They worked for 48 hours. And how do we know that they worked 48 hours? They wore the same shirt at the same time. They didn't tell us. So, okay. But there's one particular moment, it was about 2 weeks before budget day. We were working late and it was 12 past midnight. Suddenly my handphone rang and it was Pak the Prime Minister on the phone. So I answered it and he said he was just passing the MOF after a late supper and he saw the lights on in my office and he wanted to know what we were doing. So I said, sir, we are working on the budget, my boys and me, and this has been going on for some time. He said, it's already past midnight. You guys must be very tired. Why don't you just go home, rest for today, and start fresh tomorrow? That was a very nice tinkling feeling they gave all of us. The Prime Minister of the country telling us to go home and rest. And that of course, is Pak the warm and sincere man full of empathy. And so that memory remains with me throughout. And every time there's a budget, I think of Mala, I think of that moment when the phone rang well past midnight.
So, just to give the audience an idea about the human beings behind this, the budget just doesn't just pop out of nowhere. We see the Minister of Finance, in this case, Tengku Zafrul, making lengthy announcements and throwing out the numbers and figures. But behind the scenes, there's a whole team of people working. How long, in general, in average, how long is the team working on the budget before we, the public, before we, the Rakyat, hear about it?
At least 3 months, Harry, at least 3 months before. But the last 1.5 months or so, it is very intense. There is the economic report that is done quite easily, but the speech has to be done. And what we normally do, at least my time, and I'm sure even now, there's a long table and there are two screens, one in Malay and one in English. So we go through night after night preparing the speech, both in English and in Malay. And sometimes translation becomes a problem, but we resolve it and then reality check. And it is only prepared and it's only finished 2 nights before budget day. And the tradition is, Harith, on the budget night, the night before budget, all the printing is done and whatever needs to be sent to the tax departments and customs is all sent. And the Prime Minister comes with a basket of goods and we have dinner. Prime Minister belanja makan. Malam budget. So it is a tradition since decades that malam budget Prime Minister belanja makan.
Okay, now that we have heard the personal stories, the human story behind the budget, let us take a look at what was presented in Budget 2020. I just want to go through some of the highlights of Budget 2020. Like I said, all I know is from what I read in the online social media, etc. So here are some of the highlights. If you can just scroll up my producer there. So 332.1 billion allocated under budget 2020, the highest allocation compared with previous budgets. Now, 233.5 billion allocated for operating expenditure, 75.6 billion allocated for development expenditure. Government introduces Bantuan Keluarga Malaysia worth 8.2 billion, introduces excise duty on liquid gel-based vaping, acquires 32.4 billion, and it goes on and on and on and on. Now, these are all just numbers thrown at us, billions and billions and billions. I just want to bring up a couple of interesting points. Before we jump into the billions. There was one article or one sentence about how more women are hold on, let me just see where it is. But more women being included into where is that? I'm just scrolling through it. Smart Tech SME matching grant, government to exchange. Oh, you know what? Never mind. It's not there. It's not there.
I know what you mean. Okay.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
Where there is mention, and I was wondering what that had to do with the budget, where the government is now saying that every, I think, GLC or something has to have more female representation. I was just wondering, is that actually part of the budget discussion? Would that come into play, or is that just of notice, of interest to the modern public? Is that something that would go into the budget initially?
The budget at the core of it is actually quite simple. It's all about taxing fairly and spending wisely. That's it. How do you tax fairly and spend wisely? But around it, of course, there are very many issues. But maybe I'll just talk about the issue that you mentioned about women. You see, Harith, it's very interesting. The women participation rate in Malaysia is 55%. The men, 77%. In other words, of all the women who can work in the working age 15 to 65 and can work, only 55% of them work. But the men, 77% of them work. And this is always an issue with the government and Ministry of Finance. We want more women to come and participate because then, of course, it adds to the economic growth. But the challenge facing us is that it's very interesting. You see, in most countries, there is a double peak. See, the women come to work, and then when they have children, they go out, and then when the children are grown up and gone to college, they come back. So there's a double peak. In Malaysia, there's only a single peak. The women come to work, and then go off, and the children are born. They don't come back. So that is the reason why we only have 55%. In other countries, it's almost equal to men, 70, 77%. It should be at least 70%, if not 77%, if not even more, because there are more women in colleges than men now.
Yeah.
But so what can we do? So in the budget, because the budget is about, among other things, promoting growth. So the budget wants more women to come to work. And so in this budget, in every budget, but this budget, they did a couple of things. They said that if an employer employs women who have been out of work for at least a year, then the government will give wage subsidy 30% of the wage for 6 months, and then 40% for the next 6 months. So that is the way.
Okay.
There's a way to make sure more women come. And also, if a woman comes to work and she has to send her children to childcare or kindergarten, then that expense can be expense off in her tax returns. She can get exemption for up to 3,000 ringgit. And there are a few other things, funds provided for women entrepreneurs to make use of, etc. I thought this is a very good thing. This need to get women more involved in the economy.
I absolutely agree. In my household, it is the woman in this household who absolutely runs the ship and knows more about it than I do. So, yes, more power to that, I have to say. All right. So,
interestingly, just to finish off, interestingly, in the mortality rate, women live longer than men. Do you know? In Malaysia, men live up to 75 years. Women live up to 77, 78 years. And Chinese women live up to 81 years.
How many years, Chinese women?
81.
I'm not going to ask you where you got those facts and figures from. I'm just going to trust
Statistics Department. Statistics Department.
statistics.
Department of Statistics.
Thank you very much. In case anybody was like, mana dia dapat berita ni? The Statistics Department. Okay, so let us start with the general and then we'll go into more specifics. The amount of the budget 2022 is 332.1 billion. This is the highest in the nation's history. So generally, I mean, from your point of view, what do you think of the budget? Does it really touch on every segment of our rakyat in this country? Just in general.
Yeah, I think it does. But more important issue is that this budget is, as you said, rightly said, Hari, is the biggest in our history, 332.1 billion. Maybe let me just go slightly differently approach it. How do we get the money to spend? It's so big.
Yes.
Where do we get it? So let me explain conceptually where the money comes from. The money actually comes from an account called the Consolidated Fund in the government. So all the inflows goes into the Consolidated Fund, and then the money for expenditure goes out. What goes in? There are three. One, of course, is a tax.
Okay.
The other is the non-tax revenue. I'll explain. And the third is borrowing. Let me explain the borrowing first. We can borrow locally or we can borrow external. And we can borrow locally by issuing bonds and people like EPF, institutions like EPF, Co-op, banks like they have excess funds where they're going to invest. So they like government to issue bonds and they get good returns, long periods, 20 years, 15 years. So that's one source of inflow into the consolidated fund. But it's not unlimited for a number of reasons. But just to mention one reason is that we ourselves, the government, since long ago, had made a very significant prudential constraint on itself. It's not in the law, but imposed on itself, that we will only borrow for development expenditure. We will not borrow to pay salary, will not borrow to pay rent. So we only borrow for development expenditure. And as you mentioned, Harith, rightly, that this year the development expenditure is 75.6 billion for next year. So only for development expenditure we can borrow. There's a self-imposed rule. And also there are other limits such as 65% of GDP and of course there's also this issue of when you borrow more, your deficit figure comes larger. It used to be 3%, 4%. Next year it will be 6%, the minister. Now,
yeah,
some people feel 6% is too high. Some people feel 6% is not high enough. We can even borrow more. But reasonable people can disagree. But whatever it is, there's a limit, right? That you cannot borrow ad infinitum. The other one is, of course, non-tax revenue. But these are basically like dividends that your companies that you hold pay you. And the dividend that Petronas pays you is very large. But that depends on the price of oil, mainly. If the price of oil is high, you get more dividend. The price of oil is not so high, you don't get so much dividend. So it's also not under your control.
Okay.
Then you come back to the tax. Only the tax is really under the government's control because the government can decide to tax. But as I said, a good budget must tax fairly. And later your audience can judge whether in this particular case, the tax that was imposed was a fair tax or not. But these people can disagree. So what type of tax can the government impose? I'm sure, but I have no information, but I can almost imagine the staff of the treasury, the minister and his staff thinking about, okay, we have a 332.1 billion budget, we need to raise money. We must raise money, we have to spend our way out of this COVID influence, difficulties because of COVID, etc. We have to spend, but how are we going to raise the money? One, of course, is taxes by individuals. Individuals, you pay tax, we all pay tax. So we increase the tax. Now, at the moment, the tax rate is from 1% for those who earn not so much to 30%. So 30% goes to the government for those who are earning more than 2 million. Okay. So maybe we could have increased to say that anyone earning more than 3 million, maybe 35% or more than 4 million. We could have done that. So that's one way. The other way is, of course, to look at broad-based taxes like GST that was there before but taken out, now with SST, etc. The next is corporate tax. Corporate tax is very simple that we have. Whatever profit that you make, chargeable income, 24% goes to the government, right? But what the government did this time is, okay, one-off, only for 1 year, to 2022, next year, only 1 year. Those companies that earn more than 100, up to 100 is 24%. Anything more than 100, you have to pay 33%. 1/3 goes to the taxman. So that is what the government has done for only 1 year. After that, we'll go back to 24%. And that is one way that the government did raise the funds for this huge 332 billion budget.
Okay, so there is what you would call a tax on the higher income of corporates or the higher income individuals.
No, individuals, corporates.
Only corporates. Okay, so yeah, we understand the borrowing and we understand the deficit, but what about the argument from some economists that the more you borrow, the more you're going to get yourself in trouble? Is there an idea behind this? How do you determine too much borrowing or that's just the right amount of borrowing from your point of view?
There's this, what people call the neoliberal thinking, which I think is flawed. They have this idea in their mind fixed that surplus budget is good, deficit is bad, which I think is nonsense. Because whether a budget should be surplus or deficit means borrowing, depends on circumstances. In times of prosperity, of course you don't have to borrow, you have enough and you spend. But in times of difficulty, like in times of crisis, 98, 86, 2008, in times of difficulty, you have to borrow to spend. The reason is very simple, Harry. Because in times of crisis, the private sector does not have the confidence to lead, to invest.
Okay.
So if the government does nothing, the economy will just keep going down. So in times like that, the government must show confidence, must lead and spend. And then, of course, when things are better, you pay off your debt. So I think that in times like crisis like now, the government should borrow and spend. And here we are spending for human quality, human lives, and lives matter, and human lives matter. And certainly, there's no harm in borrowing, I think.
Okay. What about the argument, the social media argument that, hey, I thought the government don't have money, or where is all this money coming from? Because if you look at it from a smaller scale, like if I don't have money and I'm seen to be borrowing, of course the question would be, bro, how are you going to pay all that back? Already you don't have money, but you're borrowing. So in your knowledge, does the government have money or don't have money? What's the story?
The government has money. I just explained that 75% of all our money comes from taxes. It's not borrowing. 75% is taxes, but we borrow a little. I tell you why the borrowing is not as bad as some people make out of it. Make it out. You see, when we borrow, we have this, as I said earlier, we have this self-imposed prudential limit that we only borrow for development, to build that bridge, to build that port, to build that highway of prosperity, only for development. We never borrowed, and we don't borrow to borrow and then buy a gaji, buy a bonus, buy a sewa. No, we don't. We haven't, and we will not. Borrowing for development is okay, because when you borrow for development, that development improves the economy, creates growth, and from that growth you get revenue to pay back. So it is self-financing to some extent. So it's okay. Of course, you cannot over-borrow, but borrow within limits is okay. And in difficult times, you have to borrow. It'd be imprudent for the government not to borrow. So the question when they ask is, Can we afford to borrow? I think the more important question, Harid, is can we afford not to borrow? My answer is we cannot afford not to borrow.
We cannot afford not to borrow. Okay, I'm
Yes.
going to jump a little bit from the questions that I had set up. Was a few days before the budget came out, which is usual. There's always the Auditor of General's report that comes out before the budget. Now, in this time, the Auditor General's report stated that 620 million in losses due to financial management non-compliance at federal ministries, departments, including, for example, 4.79 million involved in equipment that was received late and not installed at the Istana Budaya. Now, if I remember correctly, every time there is an Auditor General's report, there always seems to be some kind of mismanagement. Now, we're looking at 620 million in losses. Now, first of all, let me set this up. When they said the auditor's report 2020, are they talking about the year 2020 or do they talk about 2019? Let me just get that answer first because I'm not entirely clear.
2020.
2020. So 620 million losses.
But some of them could be cumulative, but he's looking at the 2020. Yeah.
True. Some could be cumulative from 2019. But 620 million losses, that's not far off from a billion, right? And if I'm not mistaken, these kind of losses always pop up in terms of mismanagement, things purchased overpriced and all. So 620 million is not chump change. It is, especially in our Darurat. We were in Darurat in 2020. I don't know. Am I putting you in the spot here?
No, you're not. I agree with you absolutely. It's very bad for this to happen. It's very bad. The government, I agree. But let's just look at it the other way. It's very bad to happen, and the government must take action against this happening again and must put it right. But you see, interestingly, in our country, the Auditor General is free and fair, and he can bring it up. Isn't it again? This you government, you have done this bad, terrible thing, and I'm going to tell the whole world, including Harid, that terrible thing has happened. So that's good. We are very proud that we have a very independent Auditor General's office, and the government of the day says, okay, thank you for telling us, and we will do whatever we can. And the PAC chairman, Harid, the PAC chairman, who also revealed this from the audit, is a DAP member of parliament. So the Public Accounts Committee is always chaired by opposition. So that shows the transparency of the system. Okay, what happened is bad. I agree with you. There's no way you can say, oh, it's not bad. It's terrible, it's bad, it should not happen. But on the other hand, the way it was revealed by the Auditor General, independent, and the PAC chairman, DAP, shows transparency in our system as a whole.
Okay, I will agree with you that the transparency is there. In your experience, whenever a report like this comes out where announcements are made of losses, mismanagement, etc., have you experienced action taken to rectify or make sure it doesn't happen again? Just in your experience. I'm not asking you to speculate.
Yes. During the time I was there, these matters are raised in the cabinet, and the cabinet wants to know what happened, and each department will have to find out what happened and make sure action is taken that it's not repeated again. It's taken seriously, Harry. It's taken seriously by the cabinet.
I will take your word for it that it is taken seriously. I'm going to bring up this question from one of our viewers. From Wong KY says, how long can we hold on if the government continue to spend recklessly? Now, I'm not sure what Wong is referring to when he says government spend recklessly. Wong, perhaps you can give a little bit more detail. But Tan Sri, are the government spending recklessly, in your opinion?
I don't think so. I think the government's objective is to spend wisely. Not why should the government spend recklessly? Money is limited, and some of the money is borrowed. The big chunk of it, 75%, come from the taxpayers. It's actually hard-earned money, so the government has obviously no right and to just spend the money in whatever way it feels it wants to spend. It's certainly not recklessly. In fact, if you look at the way the government has spent this year, let's say just this year, basically there are two areas the government always focuses to spend. When we say the government should spend wisely, not recklessly, what do we mean? Not recklessly, wisely. There are two. One, the government's budget is just for 1 year. The treasury cannot boil the ocean, but there's always a vision that you have, isn't it? I mean, every budget for 10 years, you must arrive somewhere. You must grow the economy. So the budget is part of the process of growing the economy. Where is that city on the hill that you want to your destination? City on the hill, and the budget is part of the map to arrive at the city on the hill. Of course, there are longer-term plans, Malaysia plans, the Wawasan Kemakmuran Bersama, and these are longer-term part of the map, but the vision is there. That vision, of course, we may disagree on many things, but really, at the end of the day, what do we want at the end of the day, in 5-10 years' time? What is that vision that we have? The vision that we have, I think, and most reasonable people can agree, not only in Malaysia, but anywhere else, but in the context of Malaysia, we just want every family to be able to earn a living wage and live comfortably without being dependent on the government by way of good jobs and having the skill for good jobs and throughout their life from childhood, working life and retirement can live in dignity. That's about it actually. Very simple. The vision is very simple. So how do we get there? Of course, let me come to the budget of just announced. So that is a big vision. But immediately we have this problem because the COVID-19 has created a lot of scarring. Small SMEs, they're allowed to start business, but they have no money to start. The government has to make sure that they get the loan. And so the government say, okay, we put some money in. The small SMEs can get 10,000 loan, bigger SMEs can get a few 100,000 loan. Some of them zero interest rate, and for the 12 months there's no interest rate at all, and then later you pay back, there's more interest, all sorts of things. And then for those who have been scarred, who have lost their jobs, who are poor, those who income, families income less than 2,500, we give you 2,000 one off. And so a lot of these are either to build the economy back long term, and also to take away the scars, to enable people to come back and be productive again. And I don't see anything in this budget that's reckless, to be fair.
I'll take your word on that because, in general, I have been asking around, and most people have not been able to pinpoint, major flaws or major questions. So it does seem to be a rather, for lack of a better word, a rather average budget. Like there's no one is screaming their heads off. Some people are unhappy about some things, but it seems to be very like, okay, we're almost seem to be on the same page. Would you get that? Would you get that impression?
It's true, Harith. I think you really knocked the thing on the head, the nail on the head. It's impossible to have a budget where everybody is happy. If that happens, something is wrong. Because the demand for the budget, the people asking is so much, and nobody wants tax. So everybody just wants, give me this, give me this, give me this. The government cannot be giving everybody everything. That would be reckless, right? Because your sources are. So the government, because it's not reckless, it's very prudent, careful, can only meet so many requests. Of course, it has its own priority. We can all argue whether or not the priority is right. I may not agree with the priority, but whatever it is, the government has set a list of priority and then will spend next year based on that priority. Some of areas which other people consider priority may not be there, but that's life. As demand exceeds supply, so we have to ration now somewhat.
That just makes normal economic sense, demand and supply, etc. I think what Malaysians, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, we've come to a point now where no matter what news is thrown at us, we always manage to look at the negative side or the possible negative side, like ialah cakap aja tapi mungkin tak buat kind of thing, where we wonder why budget was allocated and did it actually end up in the right spot. Now you've been in a position of working on the budget, and I'm sure you have come across many areas of where it absolutely worked and where some areas where it didn't work. um, as far as the Ministry of Finance is concerned, how tightly can they control that the money goes to where they say it's going to or not? I mean, just in general, because now
Yeah, they can.
every
Because
argument is being thrown
yeah,
at Tunku Zafrul.
yeah. Of course. So in the budget is anything else, we cannot allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good. We want everything to be perfect, it's impossible. So the perfect cannot be the enemy of the good. And so the government comes out with this priority list. Even some of them, I myself don't agree. I think possibly we could have given some to be more for other sectors, but that's okay. Different people could disagree. But once the government the MOF has decided that this is how it goes, it's a central agency. The ministries cannot do otherwise. There's a very almost perfect control system where the ministries have to spend according to what has been approved. So what happens? I tell you what happened. So before December 31st, the Ministry of Finance will send a warrant, not warrant of arrest, but a warrant to spend, will send to each ministry. And the KSU of the ministry is the controlling officer for that warrant. And the warrant is from the budget. This amount has been given to you. And that ministry, the KSU, will send sub-warrant to various departments, Jabatan Kebajikan, under his ministry. All will be sent and they will get a sub-warrant. And that sub-warrant is the approval authority to spend that amount based on what has been approved in the budget. So perfect control. Almost perfect.
Okay. Let me get to something which you are also currently involved in. You're with the Khazanah Research Institute, correct? And they've recently launched a report on the social protection where you recommended 5 key policies to be applied by the government. And one of them was to expand the mandatory coverage of existing social insurance schemes for the working age population, especially for the self-employed, informal workers and those outside the typical office labor force. Now, in budget 2022, the social protection coverage will be expanded to other informal and self-employed workers, including artists,
Yes.
like myself. So what is your view on budget 2022 in terms of the social protection coverage for citizens, those who perhaps may not have complete protection against everything that happens?
Correct. So what we did was we came out with our view of how social protection should be. We don't expect the government to do it in one single year, but over a period they should. One of them was that, you see, Harith, what is happening in our economy is that more and more the jobs that have been created are in the informal sector.
Yeah.
At one time, when I first started working, you either join the government, bila you pension dapat pension, dapat pension, okay, or you join the big firms, and then when you retire, you have EPF. But now, more and more people are working in the gig sector, informal sector, non-standard employment contracts. It's almost 3 out of 10, coming to 3 out of 10. In a few years' time, we 4 out of 10 working in informal sector. They don't have any retirement, for example. Retirement, that's one issue. So we came up with a proposal for a insurance pension that every Malaysian will get once he retires. But this is a long-term thing. For those who are working, those who are in the formal sector, if they meet with an accident or they die, the family gets from Perkeso. Perkeso is a great institution. It's run very well, and they quickly distribute the funds to whoever is in the SOXO list. But a lot of people are not in the SOXO list, because they're not working in the formal sector. So we recommended that the informal sector should also be included. And Alhamdulillah, 9 categories of workers, including artists, are now in the SOCSO list. It's okay. Perhaps over the years more can come in, but it's a very good start. And for people who are looking for a job, they even cover you and give you some money for looking for a job, even if you're not registered. So I thought it's quite good.
Okay. So I do know that I have a lot of listeners and viewers from those sections, the informal section and the gig workers. And if you're listening and or watching, I hope that's some good news for you. And please remember to continue sharing this streaming. If you're listening on Spotify as well, please let people know that you're listening on Spotify. I have a lot of people listen after the show and they don't watch the whole streaming, but they like to listen to it. Now, listen to this. Just one part of the budget caught my eye. In budget 2020, it was pointed out that 25 million would be allocated to Yayasan Keluarga Malaysia, which is a foundation that was introduced by the Prime Minister on October 23rd, which is 7 days ago, where the budget was allocated to provide better welfare, education, to the future of orphans created by the COVID-19. Now, the first thing that came to my mind was that's quite a big allocation, 25 million, given to a foundation that was just set up 7 days ago, when there are already foundations like the Jabatan Kebajikan Masyarakat or the Zakat Institution that might be equally able to handle allocations like this. So I don't know, Tan Sri, do you have any thoughts on something like that, the Yayasan Keluarga Malaysia?
I don't really, but the issue really is, what is really the harm of setting up a Yayasan Keluarga Malaysia for orphans? Because I can't remember the figure. It's 4,000 plus children who have been made orphans because of COVID. And of course, a kind-hearted government will want to do something. There are 2 ways of doing it. One way of doing it, Hadid, you're right, the existing infrastructure, you just add on this to it. Or you set up a new infrastructure, and of course make sure the cost of the infrastructure is as low as possible. But the advantage of this, Hadid, what's the advantage of what the government has done? Because the government has put in 25, of course it's a lot of money, but these children, I think this amount were also intended to meet the children's need over the years. Some of them may be 3-4 years old until they go to college, until they find work. But the more important advantage of setting up a foundation is that we can now ask the private sector individuals to give the contributions to subscribe to this charity. If it's just a government welfare department, it'd be more difficult for the private sector to help. Here we are putting 25, maybe the private sector will be in 25 or 50 or 100. So you have good amount of money. But very, very important, there must be transparency and effective management of these funds. But setting itself, I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Well, that actually makes sense now that you say it, that if it is a Yayasan, that the private sectors can then also contribute and add on to the support. So, yeah, that makes sense. So, Tan Sri, you are still actively involved in affairs affecting the nation. Now you have seen the budget, and I'm sure you know the players involved, including Tengku Zafrul himself, and how it works behind the scene. What is your hope or wish based on what you are experiencing right now? That is the news coming through the corridors and what you know that you may be able to share with us. What is your hope for Malaysia right now, towards the end of the year and into next year?
My hope for Malaysia is that it's very simple, Hadith. Someone once told me that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So we try to make life simple. It's very simple, and most of things in life is simple. And your question is very great question. Answer is quite simple. What I wish really is that the time will come for every Malaysian and every Malaysian family, every Malaysian who wants to work can find a job, and they will give him a living wage, not a subsidized wage, but living wage, and he can live comfortably, not extravagantly, but he can live comfortably, and he has a skill. The government would have taken action to give him the skill and the tools for him to be employed in high-paying jobs. When that happens, you know, Harith, we won't have budgets where we give subsidy, assistance, cash assistance to people, because the people will be able to take care of themselves, and the budget will just be one where we focus on the future, technology, infrastructure, 5G, creating jobs of the future, etc. So that is my wish, that one day we will come to a situation where all of us will be earning, every family will be earning living wage, doing high skill jobs.
Okay. Just taking this question from Chandran. Budget 2022 expected to stay expansionary. Can you please clarify on that? I have to admit, I don't really understand what that means, expansionary. Do you, sir? Tanshri?
I do, of course. If I say I don't, then what was I doing for 5 years as a Minister of Finance?
Absolutely. That is why I have you on the show.
Yeah.
You know what you're talking about.
Especially, very simply, is if you have so much of revenue, X amount, you spend X amount, you spend X amount, that is not expansionary. But if you spend more than what you have because you borrow, then there's expansionary. So this budget is expansionary because we are spending more than our income.
Okay. I just want to ask you this one thing. There were a couple of highlights from the budget. One of them, which was, I'm gonna read this as I had typed it out or I copied. A matching grant of this is just one. You may know the answer to this or not, or you could explain the philosophy behind it. A matching grant of 100 million for Bumiputera SMEs to explore aerospace industry. Are you familiar with this part of the budget as I say it?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yes.
from the layman's point of view, 100 million for number one, the red flag of Bumiputera SMEs to explore aerospace industry. Are you in a position to explain to a layman like me what that's all about? Because it sounds weird. It sounds weird.
Let me explain. I think it's interesting, but in fact, the minister did mention this in the budget speech. Interestingly, there's one company, I forget, Aerodynamics. Aerodyne, yes. There's a company called Aerodyne. It's by a guy called Kamaro. He's a pioneer of the company, and we have investments from others as well. In certain aspects, it is number one in the world. It's fantastic. We should be very proud of it. It's just a company set up by this Kamaro, and in aerospace, in certain subsector of aerospace, it is number one in the world. That's great. But if that guy can do it, a lot of others also can do it. And this matching grant is to encourage people to do it. A matching grant means basically if an investor puts in 100 ringgit, the government will put in 100 ringgit as investment. So it's matching the private sector's investment.
Okay, I understand that part. Just playing devil's advocate, why Bumiputera's SMEs? Is there a reasoning behind that from your point of view?
I think there is, because unfortunately, even with all the government support, sometimes the Bumiputera entrepreneurs find it more difficult to raise loans in the public domain for whatever reason. So there is still that part of it. And so the government wants to make sure that it helps out. But it helps out not by giving just the money away. There is a check and balance system, because somebody else will have to invest and feel that the investment is good. The government just matches the same amount. but basically it's part of the help to make sure that it comes back to our philosophy, of development, of growth. As you remember, way back in 1970, 71, when we had the new economic policy, we basically said we want to abolish poverty. We don't want anybody to be poor. But we also want to restructure society so that the growth is shared equitably between the different segments, the different ethnic groups. And then we also said at the time, and sometimes we forget after 50 years, we are going to do that on the basis of an expanding pie. And this has even become a term in Africa now. They took it from us. Expanding pie. What does expanding pie mean? Expanding pie means that we will not take from Peter to give to Paul. No, we will not do that. We will grow the economy expands, and that portion, the expanded portion of the pie, we will distribute more equitably so that everybody can benefit from it. In business, the Bumis are still lagging behind. So to have certain policies, certain measures in the budget or outside the budget to help them, there's nothing to apologize. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Okay. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, especially about the expanding pie. Just from a layman's point of view, that yes, the policy was brought in 1970, 71. It is now 40, 30, 40, 51 years that we still appear not to have got it right in terms of leveling the playing field. So I'm just wondering, what would it take? How much more time would we need such that we can level that field? Do you have any thoughts of this?
I think to be fair, we have, in many respects, we have achieved whatever we set out to achieve. Let me explain. In 1971, in terms of professionals, less than 5% of the whole professionals in the country were Bumis. For example, doctors. There were only 79 doctors in 1971. Malay doctors, Bumiputera doctors. 79. And two of them were Tun Mahathir and Tun Siti Asma. So including Tun Mahathir and Tun Siti Asma, there were only 79. Take them out, 77. Of course, there was, and the government did wonderful thing, brought the children from the kampung to MRSM and other schools, and the rest is history. So we have about 55% of professionals who are Bumis. But even the non-Bumi professionals, they have increased in number, which is great. We want everyone to. So in terms of, if we take the Chinese or Indian population, the number of professionals in that segment compared to 71 is larger now. So it's all inclusive. So that is one area. Of course, we have done very well. We've done in education very well. So many areas we have done very well. The only area that we have not done very well is entrepreneurship. And inshallah, I think with some effort, I think the fact that this guy, Dato' Kamarul, has done so well to be number one in the world is a sign, a success of DEB, the success of new economic policy, right? So we just have to be patient and see through. But it should not be at the expense of anything else. It's just one part of the expanding pie, distributing the expanding pie.
I agree with you. It should not be at the expense of anything else. And I really, from the bottom of my heart, seriously hope that good comes out of, not just this budget, but the vision of the government for Malaysia's future. Before we go to Tan Sri, I just want to ask you on a personal level. You were involved in the government. You were a Minister of Finance too. You are privy to what goes on in the back rooms. And I don't know. I'm sure you're in contact with some of the people who are currently in the machine, the system. Are you hopeful? Are you pessimistic? Are you optimistic? Are you positive that we are heading in a trajectory in the right way? Or and be honest, what will it take for us to really, inverted commas, and I borrow a phrase here, make Malaysia great again?
Yeah. But before that, you mentioned there was 5 years as Minister of Finance too. But I'll tell you a small funny story. There was once I went for a function and on the platform was written Minister of Finance 2, of course, 2 written this way, right? So there was this foreigner who was sitting next to me and said, "Why are you known as Minister of Finance 11?" As you know, it's 2, but they don't write 2 this way. They write the Roman.
Actually,
okay.
why don't they write
I
2?
don't
Why do
know,
they write
really.
Roman numerals?
That is a mystery that nobody actually knows. But never mind. Maybe the next show I'll try to find out. But anyway, coming to this very important question. Are we going in the right direction? Basically, are we going in the direction of the city on the hill? That vision that everybody lives happily ever after, the fairy tale ending sort of. I think we are. But you see, every time we think we are doing well, something happens. For example, 86, all the prices went down and we had to come out of it. 98 financial crisis, we came out of it. 2008 international recession, we came out of it. Now COVID, and inshallah we'll come out of it. I think we are going the right direction. What we really need, I think, with all the good effort and that we are putting in, we need a government as a whole approach. It's not Ministry of Finance, this Ministry of Health, and that sort of thing, but it's government as a whole, especially in the case of health. Many people feel that health is a subject under Ministry of Health. No, health is a Malaysian subject, and then every ministry should be involved in it because poverty and health are very interlinked. And of course we can talk about it for hours. But anyway, in any case, I think we have to be a government as a whole. But more than that, Harith, more than that, going forward, if we want to reach that city on the hill, we need to have government as a whole, coordinating, not working in silo, working together, and the society as a whole, government, civil society, private sector, GLC. If we do get our act together, act as a whole, and we can, and we have done that over the years, I think we will reach the city on the hill.
Okay, the city on the hill. It is a vision. You don't have to describe it, but I know exactly what you're talking about. On that note, Tan Sri, I just want to say thank you so much for spending this hour with myself and everyone who's listening and watching. And thank you for sharing your knowledge, your background, experience, and most of all, I can see you're still passionate about the country via the budget. What's next for you? You have coming up in the next week or month. What are you focused on?
We are focused on advocating our social security. We have to advocate like everybody else, to government, to everyone. So we are doing that, and also we are going to come out with a report on health, which I personally we all believe is key going forward, especially public health. We are not focusing enough on public health, so we will come out with a report on that. And we have many good friends outside Klara who are supporting us on whatever we are doing for public good.
With that, I want to say thank you to you for your time on this Sunday evening, and I really, really, truly appreciate everything that you have shared with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Good night. You take care.
Good night. Good night. Bye.
There we go, ladies and gentlemen. Tan Sri Nur Muhammad Yackop, former Minister of Finance 2, not 11, sharing with us his thoughts on the budget. And frankly speaking, yes, I can see from the comments that many people may not have agreed with him. But from my point of view, actually, I have a little bit more insight about why budgets are constructed the way they are and the philosophy behind the budgets. For example, specifically when I brought up about the Yayasan Keluarga Malaysia, where when you register as a Yayasan, it opens up the opportunity for private sectors to then contribute to the budget. So guys, that has been what's going on Malaysia for tonight, where we looked at the budget 2022. Thank you so much for all your comments. Thank you so much for listening in. Don't go away. I got a little something special coming up right in just a few moments right now. You know what? I can see some people are agreeing, some people are disagreeing with the guest I had today, but that is the point of the show. Not as bad as what happened last week. I don't know if most of you are aware. Last week, my guest was Nur Sajjat, all the way from Sydney, Australia, and that had a lot of people disagreeing with my choice to have her as a guest on my show. But I made that point then, and I make it now, that this show is not about just listening to people that I agree with, or I'm on the same page with, or I like. This show is about talking to people who have experience, talking to people who have had knowledge, and talking to people who are current, and also talking to people from the past, because basically I'm looking for the answer to the question, what's going on in Malaysia? Where are we heading? And the people that I speak to come from all walks of life. And as I have said in my Facebook and Twitter posts, I don't necessarily have to agree with them. Neither do you, but I appreciate the fact that you did stick around, you're listening, you're watching, and you're disagreeing. Truly, even if you don't think it was the right choice, thank you for listening. Thank you for commenting. And thank you for putting forward your point of view, because although we may not agree with each other, we should be able to get along with each other. It's October, end of October, and in a few days, on Thursday, it is Deepavali, right? So, guys, happy Deepavali to everyone who will be celebrating. My in-laws, or 50% of my in-laws, are actually celebrating Deepavali as well. So I'll be heading over to Klang to have small celebration, SOP compliant Deepavali in Klang. With that, I actually want to lead out of this show with a very special video, which I came across, which I'd like to play with you and share with you, because I think it's got a very, very cool message, and it's actually told very well. It's a story told very well, and I like the way that it's been directed. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching on Spotify, if you're listening on Spotify, thank you. And share the Spotify stream with anyone in your group. And thank you for sharing the Facebook and the YouTube stream as well. If you're watching on YouTube, I hope you have subscribed as well to Harith Iskander Comedy. So guys, right now I'm going to lead out with a short film, which is a Deepavali themed short film. It is about 7 minutes long, but trust me, I enjoyed it, which is why I'm going to think that you have enjoyed it too. And this is a little something from a friend of mine who actually, I think, was involved in the production, if not directed it. Ruben, thank you so much for sharing this clip with me. And this is Taylor's Deepavali message. Good night. Take care, everyone.
டேய் என்னடா முளைச்சு 3 இலை விடல, அதுக்குள்ள திருட கத்துக்கிட்டியா? என்னடா அது? புரா
ஒண்ணும் இல்ல சார்.
குடுறா. என்னடா அது? எதுக்குடா போன திருடன? வித்துட்டு ஊர் மேய போறியா? இல்ல கேம் விளையாட போறியா? இல்ல கூட்டாண்ட போய் வந்தா காட்ட போறியா? டேய் உன்னதான்டா கேக்குறேன். இப்படிலாம் கேட்டா உனக்கு புத்தி வராது. இல்லடா போலீஸை கூப்பிடுறேன்.
சார் வேணாம் சார், வேணாம் சார். எனக்கு தான் சார் ஆன்லைன் கிளாஸ்க்காக எடுத்தேன் சார். வீட்டில் ஒரே ஒரு ஃபோன் தான் சார், அதுவும் அப்பாவோட. அவர் காலைல போனாரா ராத்திரி தான் வருவார். எனக்கு ஆன்லைன் கிளாஸ் படிக்கிறதுக்கு ரொம்ப கஷ்டமாக இருக்கும் சார். தயவு செஞ்சு போலீஸ்கிட்ட மட்டும் போகாதீங்க சார். அவங்க என்ன செய்வாங்கன்னே தெரியல. வாழ்க்கையே போயிடும் சார், வாழ்க்கையே போயிடும். தெரியாம பண்ணிட்டேன் சார், இனிமே பண்ண மாட்டேன், மன்னிச்சிருங்க.
சரி அழுவாத.
சரிங்க.
சரி அழுவாத. உனக்கு ஆன்லைன் கிளாஸ் தானே ஃபோன் வேணும்? என்கிட்ட ஃபோன் இருக்கு, நான் உனக்கு தரேன். ஆனா அதை நீங்க தான் யூஸ் பண்ணணும், புரிஞ்சுதா? அங்க போய் படி. ஓகேண்ணா, தேங்க்ஸ்ண்ணா. ராஜு, ஓ சாப்பிடலாம் வா. சாப்பிடு.
தேங்க்ஸ் அங்கிள். நீங்கள் சாப்பிடுங்க.
அப்புறம் கிளாஸ்லாம் எப்படி போகுது?
டயர்டாக இருந்தாலும் நல்லா ஜாலியாக தான் இருக்கேன் அங்கிள். ஒரு வருஷம் கழிச்சு என்னோடய ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸ் எல்லாம் இங்கே தான் பார்க்க முடியுது. ஆனால் என்ன, நிறைய பேர் இப்போ காணும். அது முக்கியமாக என்னோட மச்சாங்க முக்கால்வாசி பேர் இப்போ இல்லை.
ஏன் ஸ்கூலோட நின்ட்டானுங்களா?
அதான் போல.
என்ன பண்ணுறது, நம்ம பசங்களில் சில பேருக்கு படிக்கணுன்ற ஆசையே இல்லை. எல்லாமே சின்னாங்க கிடைக்கணும் போய் கேங்கில் சேர்ந்துருவாங்க. அதுக்கப்புறம் திருட்டு சண்டைன்னு ஊர் பூரா பிரச்சனை தேடி வச்சிருவாங்க.
அங்கிள் மன்னிச்சிருங்க அங்கிள், அன்றைக்கி நான் ஃபோன் திறந்ததுக்கு.
நல்லவங்க சில சமயம் வேறு வழி இல்லாமல் தான் தப்பு பண்ணுறாங்க. இப்போ ஒரு பையனோட வீட்டில் காசு இல்லைன்னு வச்சுங்க, அதுக்கப்புறம் அந்த பையன் ஸ்கூல் விட்டு நின்றுவான். ஸ்கூல் விட்டு நின்றாக்கா எவன் நல்ல வேலை கொடுப்பான். அதுக்கப்புறம் அவன் பிள்ளைங்களும் அதே மாதிரி தான் வளரும்.
இதுக்கெல்லாம் முடிவே இல்லையா அங்கிள்?
இதே மாதிரி நம்ம சமுதாயத்தில் நிறைய நடக்குது. அதுக்காக தான் நான் உங்கள்கிட்ட திரும்பவும் சொல்கிறேன், படிப்பு மாத்திரம்தான் நம்ம தலையெழுத்தை மாற்ற முடியும். முதல்ல நீ மாறணும். நீ மாறினாதான் உங்களை சுற்றி உள்ளவங்க உன்னால் மாற்ற முடியும்.
கண்டிப்பாங்க.
ஃபோனில் படிக்கிறதுக்கு ரொம்ப கஷ்டமாக இருக்கும். இந்த லேப்டாப்பை வச்சுக்கோ.
ஏன்ங்க ஏன் இந்த அளவுக்கு நல்லது செய்றீங்க எனக்கு?
அப்போ தான் நீ நல்லா படித்து மற்றவங்களுக்கும் நல்லது செய்ய முடியும். சாப்பிடு.
மிஸ்டர் ராஜு, கடந்த ஆண்டு மலேசியால மிக சிறந்த இளம் தொழில் அதிபர்ல நீங்களும் ஒருவர். இப்போ இந்த லாப நோக்கமற்ற கல்வி மையத்தை ஆரம்பிக்கிறீங்க. இதெல்லாம் எதுக்காக செய்றீங்கன்னு தெரிஞ்சுக்கலாமா?
சந்தர்ப்பம். பல வருஷத்துக்கு முன்னுக்கு என் லைஃப்ல ஒரு நல்ல மனிதர் எனக்கு கொடுத்த அதே சந்தர்ப்பம். நான் ஒரு திருடனாவோ இல்ல ஒரு படிக்காத இந்தியனா ஆகாம இருக்க எனக்கு தரப்பட்ட சந்தர்ப்பம். என்னாலையும் படிச்சு பெரிய ஆளாக முடியும், என்னை சுத்தியுள்ளவங்களோட லைஃப் என்னால சேஞ்ச் பண்ண முடியும்னு எனக்கு தரப்பட்ட சந்தர்ப்பம். இது எல்லாமே எதையும் எதிர்பார்க்காம உதவி செய்யணும்னு நினைச்சப்ப உருவான சந்தர்ப்பம். இந்த தீபாவளி எப்படி ஒளிய கொண்டு இருளை போக்குறோமோ அதே மாதிரி அறிவை கொண்டு அறியாமையை வெல்லுவோம். அந்த சந்தர்ப்பத்தை நான் மற்றவங்களுக்கும் தரணும்னு ஆசைப்படுறேன்.